I've been giving a lot of thought to just how important, particularly at this time, an interest and more importantly, the actions that follow an interest in our own learning development is, and how so many organizations are going to be preoccupied with their very existence and won't have the time, the budget, the inclination, the headspace to be thinking about the development of less people doing more in the workplace. So this short presentation is about how important it is at this time to do the simple, straightforward, work-based self-development activities in the absence of any interest, understandably almost, from organizations around that. So there you go, believe in yourself. The most important thing of all, I think, is to believe that it's a worthwhile exercise, that the actions you take to develop yourself, to direct your own learning is worthwhile, will result in something positive and lasting happening. So it begins with that. If you don't actually believe this is an exercise worth doing, you won't do it. It's as simple as that. And let's not kid ourselves. An awful lot of people, preoccupied as they will be with other things, will not find the time, I wish they would, to put some deliberate plan into practice. Now, here are some thoughts on what that deliberate plan might look like, because it's perfectly reasonable, particularly if this is not a conscious, deliberate pattern you've been in before, to think, well, where do I start? Yeah, okay. Working on your own development, being in control of your own learning, all that clever stuff is almost irrefutably sensible. Where do you start? So I'm going to give some tips and ideas here based upon my own practice of how, without any expenditure other than a bit of thought and a bit of time, you can go about this. First thing to do, I think, is to see your real work as the primary source of your own learning and development. That's where we learn most. Yes, and not just work, but domestic life too. There's a lot of transference between domestic activities, when, of course, post-pandemic, one hopes these revert to normal, and the workplace. The workplace will be where you learn most. It always has been, it is now, and it always will be. And I think this is the time really to legitimize that, to open it up, to see perhaps with focus for the first time that all around you are more learning and development activities and opportunities than you could ever reasonably exploit, because work is inherently developmental. There's things we're doing now we weren't doing 6 months ago, 6 years ago, in my case 38 years ago. There's things we're doing now that we certainly weren't doing 6 or 8 months ago. The workplace is moving, it's dynamic, it's constantly presenting us with new challenges and experiences. It's important we recognize that, we capture it, and we consciously and knowingly retain it. And those are important things. So the workplace is your primary source of learning. So making that a conscious process is very important. So one source of learning and development for us is reading. Yes, reading. How about that? Those of us that are members of professional bodies, and that'll be a lot of people, have access to libraries electronically of excellent sources of articles. My own professional body, CIPD, I consider the access to electronic sources worth the subscription in its own right, and it certainly is if you start looking at what it otherwise would cost you. You don't need to have an electronic library to work from. You can find an awful lot of sources of interest and that would continue and push your own development out there simply by using Google. Be a bit exploratory, be adventurous, spend a bit of time. Don't expect to hit the exact stuff you're looking for and to learn immediately what you need to make this work, because it will take a bit of use of Google. You will find a lot of free material out there, very accessible. Some of it's in article form, some of it's in, I read a lot of published dissertations and theses of people, for instance. It's an excellent source of learning. Be a bit exploratory in what you read, critically, very importantly. Don't fall into read and forget mode. You read something, you think, hey, that was useful, and 3 days later, with everything that goes on, you've forgotten just about all of it. You might remember fragments of it, and it's dangerous sometimes to think you remember something, you're not remembering the clarity. The way to get over that is to read and note. It might seem a bit of a long way around things, it might seem like more of an effort than you're prepared to put in. Well, if it is, let it go. Leave it to other people who are prepared to make those efforts. But I recommend to you that it is worth noting your learning. I note it in my learning from what I read in longhand, and then I type it up, for instance. Whatever form works for you is important, but the most important thing to do is to find a way to retain what you learn from what you read. Watching videos. Well, watching videos is something a lot of us do already. There's an awful lot of relevant work-based video out there. Yes, you can find it on YouTube, but you can also find it in a variety of university sites and of different publications. The Harvard Business Review has an excellent video library if you're interested in business activities. If you go to somewhere like INSEAD or Stanford, Cranfield, you'll find a variety of things. Again, be exploratory. Be prepared to put a bit of time aside to build the platform from which you can do this most thoroughly. And again, watch and note. Don't just watch and forget. There's a heck of a lot of really good material out there. Some of it's technical, which is useful. Some of it is interpersonal. Some of it is, well, it's whatever it takes. It's out there, I guarantee you. All you've got to do is to find the means to find it, and the desire, the motivation to put the time aside to learn the skills that will lead you to it. Critically important also is that by whatever means you find new material, that you learn new things, is to find the time to reflect on it, to consciously, deliberately reflect on what you've learned. That means undisturbed time. That time might not be easily found in the workplace. I don't know. Just find a space and think about what you've learned. Reflect on it. Build connections between new learning and past practices. Essentially, draw more value from what you've learned. And I use that term loosely because I consider learning to be a behavior, not just knowledge. But when you gain new knowledge, think about how you can use it. Think about the application of it. Think about the obstacles and difficulties and what you can do to overcome it. There is a huge richness that comes from insights that are the result of reflection that would not otherwise be there. So if you've spent some time, you've invested the time in finding the learning, don't lose it, even though you might have noted it, by not thinking it through. Reflection time is critically important, which of course leads me inevitably to what you're going to do about it, because an awful lot of people will do nothing at all. Let's not kid ourselves. I happen to believe very strongly indeed that this is the time, like no other, that developing habits that you continue around showing not just an interest, but taking the actions around your own learning are critically important. Now is the time. It's time to get on with it. It's time to actually do the things perhaps you wish you'd done before, because you ain't going to get much action from a lot of employers who, like I say, are scrambling around trying to work out how to exist, never mind anything else. So there you go. I hope that all helps a bit. And if it helps you at all, then don't hesitate to get in touch with me. Bye for now.